Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. Introduction. In a quiet town nestled in the heart of Illinois, the air was thick with an unsettling silence. This was the kind of place where families gathered for weekend barbecues and children played freely in sun-drenched parks. Autumn had swept in, draping the landscape in hues of amber and gold. Leaves crunched underfoot, and the scent of pumpkin spice wafted through cafes. It seemed like an idyllic scene, yet beneath this facade of normalcy, darkness lurked. At the edge of town, the forgotten quarry lane led to an abandoned limestone quarry. Local teens would dare one another to venture close to its looming cliffs, sharing tales of ghost sightings and eerie sound. When the sun dipped below the horizon, fear draped over this wasteland like a heavy cloak. But that night, it wouldn't be ghost stories that would stir Unrestrader. It would be the discovery of a body that would unravel the tapestry of this community. On a day like any other, the quarry was marked only by its jagged edges and the stillness of stagnant water. But it was on that particular autumn afternoon that a group of hikers stumbled upon a chilling sight, a lifeless female form, half submerged in the murky depths. Panic ensued. Amidst shouts and frantic calls to the authorities, the serene town was plunged into chaos. As the police arrived, an unsettling question lingered in the air. Who was she, and how did she end up here? Little did the townspeople know, the uncovering of the young woman's identity would lead them down a treacherous path filled with buried secrets and betrayals that ran deep within the community's roots. The victim. The medical examiner's office buzzed with activity on that brisk October morning as the body was brought in for autopsy. Dr. Emily Rowe, a well-respected forensic pathologist, donned her gloves with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to delving into the hidden truths of the deceased. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, the young woman lay on the examination table, a blank canvas for the secrets waiting to be revealed. The victim was identified as Sarah Collins, a 25-year-old graphic designer who had recently moved back to the town after spending several years in the city. Those who knew her painted a vivid picture of a spirited young woman. Whoa. Sarah had a wild mane of chestnut hair, vibrant green eyes, and a smile that sparked warmth in every interaction. She loved art, adored animals, and was known for her open heart, a shimmering beacon against the world's darkness. Yet, the more Dr. Rowe examined Sarah's body, the more the facade of her life began to crack. Evidence of struggle was evident. Bruises marred her arms, and a faint cut traced along her jawline. It seemed as if she had fought valiantly, resisting whatever malevolent force pulled her into that desolate quarry. The pathologist noted the signs of strangulation, a grim detail that sank into the pit of her stomach. It became clear that Sarah's life had been punctuated not only by laughter and creativity, but also by hidden threats. Friends recounted the odd messages Sarah had received in the weeks leading up to her death, cryptic texts and derogatory comments aimed at belittling her. With every clue unearthed, the picture grew more complex. Sarah had been grappling with shadows that would soon unravel the life of a beloved member of the community. The investigation into her death had begun, but answers were elusive, hidden beneath layers of friendship, resentment, and the chilling realization that someone had wanted her silence. The crime scene. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the quarry in eerie shades of orange and violet, the police barricaded the area. efficiently cordoning off the crime scene. Detective Mark Hargrove, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for meticulous attention to detail, stood at the edge, surveying the jagged terrain. The quiet churning of the water against the rocks seemed to echo the tension that enveloped the scene. Forensics teams began their methodical work, establishing a perimeter and gathering evidence as the last traces of daylight gave way to encroaching darkness. Each investigator moved with purpose, knowing that every scrap of information could be vital, as minute as it may seem. Streetlights flickered on, casting a harsh glow onto the muddy banks where Sarah's body had been found. Hargrove knelt beside the edge of the water, his instincts kicking into high gear. The shallow pool of murky water concealed more than just a victim. It might harbor clues. He noted the stones strewn about haphazardly, some indicating possible scuffle marks. The ground was soft, allowing him to spot a few fresh boot prints, leading towards dense woods that bordered the quarry. Did someone linger here, watching or waiting before the tragic end? With each passing moment, a narrative began to form in his mind. Sarah had arrived at the quarry, perhaps unaware of the danger lurking in the twilight. Hargrove's gaze drifted upwards, scanning the nearby trees for any sign of a vantage point. The world was a jumble of fallen branches and whispering leaves, but if someone had been associated with Sarah, who could have known she would come out here alone? As he stood up, a faint rustling among the trees caught his attention, drawing focus from the cold reality of the crime scene towards the looming severity of what was yet to come. Investigating a murder was never just about the body, it was also about excavating uncomfortable truths buried deep within the community itself. The investigation had just begun, but the stakes were already alarmingly high. The investigation into Sarah Collins' death progressed with urgency, but without clear direction. Detective Hargrove assembled a team of detectives, each bringing unique expertise to the table. His office, usually a sanctuary of paperwork, was teeming with energy and the electricity of unresolved questions as they gathered to discuss their initial findings. "Let's start with the basics," Hargrove asserted, rallying his team. "We need to establish a timeline for Sarah's last known movements." The room filled with murmurs as they pieced together fragments of her life from colleagues, friends, and the sparse details of her social media. Everyone remembered Sarah, the vibrant designer always snapping pictures, infusing color into the mundane. One colleague recalled a recent late shift at the design studio, where Sarah had worked an atmosphere of camaraderie, but also tension. She had confided in a few close friends about receiving hostile messages from someone she believed was stalking her. Disturbing revelations filled the air, echoing loud as the walls of the conference room closed in around them. Inside a neighborhood coffee shop, Sarah was often seen chatting with her best friend Rachel, who became their next focal point. Hargrove and his partner, Detective Lisa Chan, made their way to the quaint establishment, the smell of fresh brew and pastry swirling around them like the warmth of familiarity. Rachel, her eyes red and puffy, looked vulnerable in a world that had suddenly darkened. She was worried, she admitted through trembling lips, recalling a man who lingered too long in the background of Sarah's life, Somion, who had inserted himself into her social circles without ever being welcome. He showed up places he shouldn't have been. It felt wrong. Hargrove exchanged a glance with Chan, understanding the significance. With each interview and piece of information gathered, they painted a picture of a young woman ensnared in a web of fear. It became increasingly evident that they were not only solving a murder, but were entangled in the personal struggles of those left behind. As they exited the shop, determination filled the air. Apprehension lingered, and the clock was ticking. The truth had to come to light before the shadows snuffed out all hope. The dead ends. Weeks passed, and despite their relentless pursuit of answers, the investigation hit an agonizing series of dead ends. The excitement of the initial discovery had faded, replaced by a heavy cloud of frustration that loomed over Hargrove and his team. They had conducted numerous interviews, sifted through electronic communications, and combed through the town's social circles, yet nothing concrete was unveiled. Each witness seemed to offer a piece of the puzzle, but it was as if they were handed missing cards from different decks. The man Rachel had mentioned, a figure lurking in shadowy corners, had no identity that could be confirmed. With every possible lead that unraveled into fruitless endeavors, the frustration only elevated. No one recalled seeing anything unusual around the quarry that fateful night. Even the townspeople, who once whispered of ghostly apparitions, were silent. As Hargrove sat at his desk, surrounded by unsorted files and coffee-stained notes, he felt a weight settle on his chest. Flicking through Sarah's social media, images of vibrant life failed to alleviate the sorrow that enveloped him. They speculated the stalker was merely a figment of her imagination. Yet how could that be reconciled with the violence of her final moments? One late evening, Hargrove and Chan re-examined the video footage from the design studio where Sarah worked. They spent hours scouring the grainy clips, desperate not to miss a moment. Then, they found a fleeting glimpse of a man lingering outside the entrance, a nondescript figure with a cap pulled low. He shouted a certain name, but the resolution was too poor to make out who it was. Hope flared for a brief moment before crumbling again. Investigating the man led to untraceable social media accounts, non-existent work records, and a dead end that felt far too personal. Each time they thought they brought momentum back to the case, it slipped through their fingers like sand. Collectively, they wore the burden of guilt. Hargrove couldn't shake the feeling that they were letting Sarah down. As they gathered once more, sharing their findings and frustrations, an unsettling stillness filled the room. The staff meeting turned into a solemn remembrance, each detective silently pledging to dig deeper, even in the murky waters of uncertainty. The search for Sarah's killer could not end here. A break in the case. Just as hope began to wane, an unexpected call disrupted the stagnant air of the precinct. It was Officer Melanie Carter, dispatched to a noise complaint at an apartment complex on the outskirts of town. As she navigated the dimly lit corridors, a hushed conversation caught her attention before she reached the source of the disturbance. Two residents were whispering furiously, exchanging stories about a man they both recognized, someone who had shown unsettling interest in Sarah before her death. Officer Carter's instincts kicked in. She thought it curious enough to mention to Hargrove. The detective, busy poring over files, sat up straight, contemplating the potential implications behind this new tip. Moments later, she arrived, and together, they delved deeper into the information. As much as the officers had uncovered, it was still unclear who this man truly was. Still, the residents provided vital details, the hope of a name. A mishmash of characteristics that began to stir within memories long since buried. He was described as having dark hair, a scruffy beard, and the tendency to stare too long, making those around him uncomfortable. He was always around the gallery, one resident recalled. I could tell Sarah didn't want anything to do with him. Fueled by this new lead, Hargrove and Chan pivoted their focus. They quickly gathered enough to secure a search warrant for his known address. At the specified apartment complex, the officers waited anxiously, adrenaline coursing through their veins as they prepared to confront this man and unearth the truth behind the shadows he cast. The apartment door swung open, revealing a younger man with a look of surprise that morphed into unease. His name was Dean Parker, and he claimed to have merely admired Sarah's artwork, nothing more. Yet his eyes betrayed a deeper story. As they struck up a conversation, Hargrove's trained intuition flickered. There was something in Dean's demeanor, an anxious twitch of the hands, and the way he kept glancing down, as if he were gauging the truth of the moment. It wasn't long before Hargrove pressed him on his whereabouts the night Sarah died. Dean's fading bravado only deepened the suspicions that had been simmering beneath the surface. A sense of urgency propelled them forward. With the pieces starting to align, Hargrove knew they had to dig deeper. Could Dean be the missing connection, the figure hiding in the shadows, lurking just outside Sarah's vibrant world? The suspect, under the stark lights of the interview room, Dean Parker sat across from Hargrove and Chan, his fidgeting form a stark contrast to the composed detectives effortlessly commanding the space. The air was thick with anticipation as Hargrove leaned forward, piercing Dean with a steady gaze. "You mentioned you admired Sarah's work," he began, purposefully guiding the conversation. "But how well did you really know her?" Dean's eyes darted around the room, a telltale sign of his growing discomfort. "I didn't know her well," he stammered, scratching his beard nervously. "Just through the gallery. I always thought she was talented, you know." "Did you ever approach her?" Chan interjected, her tone sharp yet measured, focusing on the subtle cracks forming in Dean's facade. His demeanor altered in an anxious swallow and the involuntary clenching of his fists. He was keenly aware of the tension, but he struggled to maintain his composure. "I tried a couple of times, but she wasn't interested," he admitted, the words escaping like a confession. Hargrove leaned back, observing how the young man recoiled at every probing question. It became increasingly clear that Dean engaged in a dangerous dance of obsessional belief, that admiration could morph into something more profound, even if he was blind to the line he ultimately crossed. "We've heard some concerning things," Hargrove continued, lowering his voice to draw Dean in closer. "Some residents said you had a habit of showing up around her. Did Sarah ever express fear towards you?" At the mention of fear, Dean bristled. "Fear? Fear? No, I mean, she never said anything like that to me." The panic rising in his voice was palpable. The facade began to crack further. Hargrove exchanged a glance with Chan, silently reaffirming their suspicion. The weight of evidence loomed in the air, yet they needed something more concrete. "We know about your messages to Herthos you sent through social media. Texts that a witness described as stalking." Dean's face blanched. "Look, I was just trying to get her attention." His voice quivered, defenses crumbling under the pressure. "I thought if I could just show her how much I appreciated her work." His words hung uncomfortably in silence, revealing not only his fixation, but possibly the motive for a crime they struggled to comprehend. Hargrove leaned closer, taking advantage of Dean's vulnerability. "We want the truth, Dean. If you really admired Sarah, why didn't you respect her boundaries?" In that moment, Dean's bravado slipped altogether. The mask slipped, hinting at layers of complexity that spiraled unanchored. Hargrove sensed they were reaching a breaking point, a pivot where clarity might shatter through the murky depths of deceit. He pressed further, knowing that every heartbeat could drive them closer to uncovering the full story behind Sarah's tragic end. The walls of his psyche were closing in, and before long, Dean would have to confront his actions in that unforgiving room. The trial. The courtroom buzzed with hushed whispers, an electric tension crackling in the air as the state's case against Dean Parker unfolded under the unforgiving glare of fluorescent lights. It was a community reeling from the loss of Sarah Collins, searching for solace in justice. The gallery was packed, friends and family of both Sarah and Dean, some drawn by horror, others by empathy, filling the road. Each face told a story of grief, but also a desire for answers. Hargrove sat in the front row, his eyes locked onto the defendant. Dean had traded his scruffy, disheveled appearance for a suit that only seemed to heighten his discomfort. He fidgeted in his seat, casting furtive glances at the witnesses called upon to share their pieces of the story. The proceedings had already evoked a torrent of emotions, from tears of despair to anguished gasps. The prosecution laid out their case with methodical precision. They unraveled the details of Sarah's last days, her frantic messages, the chilling text threads that bridged the gap between admiration and obsession. They revealed the unsettling testimony of neighborhood residents who shared stories about Dean's persistent presence near the gallery, how a once benign interest turned malignant. Dean's defense attempted to weaponize uncertainty, painting him as a misguided admirer who had not crossed any legal lines, arguing that his conduct, however inappropriate, was rooted in infatuation rather than malice. But with each witness who recounted Dean's obsessive behavior, that defensive veneer began to chip away. Under the piercing gaze of the jury, the emotional testimonies from Sarah's friends were especially heart-wrenching. Rachel spoke of sleepless nights, of listening to Sarah's fears and anxieties, which had begun to eclipse her once vibrant spirit. The words hung heavy, filling the room with palpable sorrow. She told me she didn't feel safe, that someone was watching her. I wish I had done more to help her. The trial stretched over days, the slow march of time punctuated by the weight of Sarah's absence. Hargrove maintained meticulous notes, replaying the investigation in his mind, weary but determined. Closing arguments arrived. The prosecution drew a potent portrait of a man whose fixation led him to snuff out the light of a woman who had so much left to give. The defense clung tightly to the idea of ambiguity, arguing for Dean's troubled nature rather than outright guilt. In the end, the jury retired to deliberate, and Hargrove waited with bated breath, a storm of emotions swirling within him. After what felt like an eternity, they returned, and the foreman read aloud the verdict. The room went silent, hearts pounding as he slowly uttered the word, guilty. A wave of relief flooded the gallery, mixed with the sting of grief and loss. Justice had been served, though it wouldn't erase the pain nor restore what was lost. As Hargrove and his team exchanged quiet nods, the reality washed over them. They had sought the truth, and it had come at an unbearable cost. Life would never be the same. But somewhere, amidst the sorrow, there was hope for healing. A reminder that even in darkness, justice could still prevail. The aftermath. In the weeks following the trial, the small town of Maplewood struggled to reestablish a sense of normalcy. The echoes of courtroom drama faded, but the lingering pain felt visceral, like a wound that had only begun to heal. On the surface, life resumed. A fresh layer of autumn leaves blanketed the ground. Children once again played in park fields, and townsfolk conversed casually over coffee, but the threads of community were forever altered. Sarah Collins' family held a memorial service, a celebration of the vibrant life that had been cruelly extinguished. Friends and loved ones gathered to share stories. Laughter mingled with tears as they recalled her radiant spirit. Rachel delivered a heartfelt eulogy, her voice steady but raw. Sarah taught us to appreciate beauty in our everyday lives. Let us honor her by carrying her light forward. In the heart of Maplewood, changes began to take root. A community vigil, initially planned to commemorate Sarah, evolved into a rally for awareness on the dangers of stalking and mental health. Hargrove watched in gratitude as local organizations sprang into action, holding workshops and providing resources for those grappling with similar fears. This was their response, turning grief into a catalyst for change. Yet the aftermath was not without its scars. Dean's conviction ignited a profound divide among townspeople. While many commended the justice system for its outcome, others whispered of the possibility that Dean was a scapegoat, a misguided soul lost in an emotional abyss. Heated debates filled cafes, sometimes spilling onto social media, revealing the complexities of human behavior that left many feeling uneasy. As winter approached, Hargrove found himself reflecting on the case during quiet moments. His work was not without cost. The images of Sarah, the devastation surrounding her death, lingered like shadows. He resumed daily routines, yet intangibly. He bore the burden of the aftermath, a silent promise to keep seeking the truth in every case he encountered. Even as he moved forward, the town needed to confront its demon. The unresolved issues surrounding mental health and relationships now loomed. An invitation for the community to engage in deeper conversations where boundaries, respect, and compassion might intertwine. In the depth of night, Hargrove often thought of Sarah's laughter, the photographs highlighting her spirits sparkling around the room, and the gaping hole her absence created. Yet, like the frost-kissed mornings, there was a nascent hope in the air, a hope that through the ashes of tragedy, something meaningful could yet bloom, a legacy rooted not in fear, but in understanding, support, and a commitment to safeguard the spirit still shining in their midst. Reflection. As the last vestiges of winter gave way to spring, Hargrove stood at the quarry's edge, the place where it had all begun. The air felt fresh, charged with the promise of rejuvenation and new beginnings. Yet an undeniable heaviness remained. Here, where the sun's rays broke through the trees, illuminating the shallow waters below, he could still feel the echoes of Sarah's laughter mingling with the permanence of her absence. He reflected on the journey through revelations, the heartache, and ultimately the sense of justice that had unfolded. But deep down, he knew the aftermath of the case transcended mere legalities. It had become a profound introspection on the threads of human connection. Each interaction held weight, and every voice mattered. The people of Maplewood had been drawn together by loss, yet they now stood united in their resolve to foster change. Hargrove found solace in the progress of awareness that transformed tragedy into a lifeline for others. He recognized how pivotal it was to promote understanding around boundaries, mental health, and respect as they intertwined through the fabric of their daily life. His role had shifted. He was part of a larger narrative community, learning to reach out, listen, and ultimately prevent another soul from falling victim to the shadows obscuring their light. As he took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of damp earth and budding blossoms, Hargrove understood one thing clearly. Sarah had not died in vain. Her story, laden with both heartache and hope, would spark the conversations necessary to steer others away from the dark. Instead, they would advocate for empathy, connection, and a support network that defined them as a community, woven together, daring to confront the depths of their vulnerabilities and vulnerabilities of others.